Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Tuesday talk. Brady, if you would please go ahead and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Happy to, Jen. Always nice to spend some time with you. Hello, everybody. My name is Brady Schwab. My role at right at home is Chief Growth and Strategic Operations Officer. So, really, what that means is my day-to-day focus is thinking about, how do we grow the organization, kind of from an inorganic perspective. So that means new business lines, new service opportunities, new sorts of referral relationships. How do we continually think differently about the business as the market changes, as demographics change, those sorts of things. So that's kind of on the strategic growth side. On the strategic operations is more how do we execute cross-functionally in the delivery of our strategic plan. So every 3 years we sit down with a new theme and update our annual strategic plan. And that really, is a lot of cross-functional initiatives and coordination across a lot of different functions. And it's my pleasure to help make sure that we connect all of those things and execute as a team in service of our franchisees and the clients that they ultimately serve. So that's what I get to do every day. I have the best job in the company. That's Jen, your secret, just you and me. But I love what I get to do it right at home, and I love what we ultimately do as part of our mission.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm just going to jump right into it. I'm going to ask you a lot of the same questions that I ask other people that I interview because I know each one has there are varying answers to these questions, and I'd love to get your perspective. So I'm going to start with a frequently asked question, and a lot of these are FAQs that we get on the franchise development
Yep.
team. But this one is what sets Right at Home apart from other senior care franchises, knowing that our viewers are potentially exploring other home care franchises as well. So in your opinion, what sets us apart from others?
Yeah, great question, and yes, there's we're obviously not the only home care franchisor in the business. And to think about from my perspective what sets us apart and differentiates us is really the depth and the maturity of the organization. We've been serving seniors for 31 years. We've been franchising for 26 years. We have a wonderful combination of brand reputation and support model for our franchisees. We have our national partnerships and well-established relationships, and we have an innovation roadmap that I kind of spoke to from the strategic growth perspective about being really excellent at what we need to do today, but how do we need to think differently? Because my parents are in their late 70s. Our average client is 5 or 6 years older. um, my parents' expectations are very different than the expectations of the clients we serve today. So how do we get in front of that? How do we be prepared for that? Now, that's something that we've kind of baked in organizationally into what we do. And our size gives us scale. Franchise development is kind of leading the charge in continuing to grow the right at home footprint. But our culture here in Omaha and in our selection process in our franchise system really keeps it very, very personal. Personal. We're big enough to be well represented across the industry and across healthcare, and we can invest in the business and in technologies and things of that sort that a smaller organization simply can't. But at the end of the day, our focus, the 110 people that work in this building, is really supporting that individual office, building a sustainable and profitable business. And I think that balance of, where we've come in terms of the size of the organization, but how we kind of, as a team, everybody rolls up their sleeves. Everybody really thinks about, having a franchisee in the chair next to them, regardless of what meeting we're in, and the culture that has been built and continues to permeate here, I think is different. And I think once you experience it, we're always asking new team members that join, new franchisees that join, if culture and people were one of the things that brought you here, do we live it out? Do you feel it once you cross the threshold? And I'm really proud to say that it is almost without exception that people say, "Gosh, you seem different from the outside, and now that I'm here, it is different." But you really believe it. So I think that ultimately is the engine that keeps that differentiation and that individual focus really top of mind.
Great, great answer. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to jump right into the next one. So, from your vantage point, which by the way, the vantage point being your expertise on, previously, healthcare, current, home care, technology, just business in general, what advantages does our model give to new owners starting on day one?
Yeah. Great question. And at a foundational level, you get to step into a system where the fundamentals have been solved. That we the as I like to say, success leaves the trail, and there's a lot of success throughout this organization, and it's both lived out in the way that we get franchisees from 0 to 1. But also our legacy system. We're just talking today, we've got celebrations of people 15, 20, 25 years in the system. And when you think about most businesses, 80% of businesses fail within 5 years. To think about the legacy and the tenure of business owners, it's because those foundational principles have been established, and these are folks that really dig into those. Now, that extends to the technology and how we continue to evolve the technology from compliance. The regulatory environment continues to change. How we recruit caregivers changes as the labor force changes, just like our clients that I talked about before. Marketing continues to evolve as we have moved so much into digital marketing and social, and now AI. How we align our care models with clinical needs and the reimbursement and expectations on the clinical and payer sides. We've established all of that. So instead of that first year trying to figure out just how do I approach home care, what are the operational beats, you get to really focus on building the relationships in your community, developing your team, and those are kind of the key drivers of success. So for somebody like me, I like systems, I like models. You get to step right in and have a system that you can adopt, hit the ground running, and really we have the opportunity to accelerate your development. You're not showing up trying to guess and feel your way through it. You're showing up to execute the plan.
Okay, thank you for that. That was also another great answer and a
Stop
question
asking.
just.
You're a little surprised by that, but
Oh my gosh, wow.
I'll let that slide.
That's a really great answer, Brady. Okay, thank you for that. So a question just came in. I was about ready to read you one of my questions, but I got a question from the audience. I'll read it to you. It says, speaking of technology, what role do you envision AI having in the Right at Home model? Is Right at Home exploring the AI world?
Yeah, you've uncorked a can of worms there. Isn't it amazing? I mean, you think that this really wasn't commonplace 2 years ago, and now it's ubiquitous. And I'll be honest, like I think any organization that is being truthful, we continue to try to get our arms around it, and so much of that is what's real and what is maybe a pipe dream or hopeful. And the barrier to building something is so low now that um, that used to be really hard, and you had to invest a lot of time and money. And now it's really quick to build. It's really hard to support, right? It used to be the opposite. It'd take a lot of work and resources to build, and then it was easier to support. So we have a team that's really focused on, starting with, what's safe to use. We have personal health information. We have HIPAA protected information. We have identifiable information that, has real risk and penalties if we're not thoughtful and keep that information secure. So it starts with that. What's secure, what's safe to use, whether it's exposure of personal information or stuff that is proprietary, or just stuff we don't want to get trained on, right? The AI models are continuing looking for new information to consume. So starting with thinking about how do we use it safely, and then once we can find the tools that fit that that rigor, how do we really apply it to make your business more efficient? There's just the nature of home care, so much of the investment and expense from a business owner is in the direct caregiver, and that's where it should be. Of course, that's what we do. But how do we get really efficient in our back office functions? How do we get efficient around marketing? How do we use technology to make people's day-to-day jobs better, easier, make them more productive so that they can focus more on the relationship business? That's a key part that we're focused on. And we think that's going to play a big part when you think about the challenge of scheduling and this Tetris that a scheduler for years and years has been kind of this huge cognitive load. How can AI come in and be part of that? I'm not ready to say that AI should take over scheduling. There's so much nuance, and we talk about human in the loop. We really believe that AI is there to support, but it's not always right. And it can sound really, really right, or can make decisions that make sense. But that human in the loop understands that this caregiver really doesn't do well in this scenario, or this is too far for them to travel. Maybe that wasn't captured by AI. We need to walk that decision back. So we think from the back office operation to some of this front office operation, and then how does it start to impact how we deliver care? I think that's really interesting. I think when you look across healthcare more broadly, that's the last place that people want to bring AI into, because that's a pretty sacred place, and we want to be really have a high degree of certainty around how AI is going to behave in those situations, and yet the ability to observe what's going on in the home, to help record notes and create accuracy and the right follow-up and the integration of care plans into the activity. We think there's a lot of opportunity, but it's all around what does a human caregiver do? I don't think it's going to go out of style anytime soon. I believe as humans, we want more human connection as we get older. That's certainly been my experience working with seniors. And like I said, I don't think that's going to be a big disruptor. But the efficiency gains that we can have in those three areas, I think, are real. And yes, we're looking at them always starting with, who's going to be a safe steward of our data and our responsibility, and who maybe we don't believe is up to snuff from that perspective.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, so next question. Knowing that the people that are watching this, they've most likely have never done anything like this before. This is either their maiden voyage on, being an entrepreneur for the very first time, or even if they are a current business owner, perhaps they've never been part of a franchise. And an FAQ that we get on the franchise development team is like, I just don't know what to expect. What is that first 6 months going to look like to me? So even leading up to when their business, officially opens. But from your perspective, can you kind of paint that picture of what to expect those first 6 months in business? So anything that, any tips that you have on, hey, your first 6 months of business, focus on these things, or expect those things from the franchisor?
Yep. Well, I'll start with a little bit of what does it look like what should you expect as becoming right at home franchisee, and I think the way I'd categorize maybe that first 6 to 12 months is really about focusing on building your competence. What is home care? What are the critical aspects of it? Confidence, and that's confidence in your ability to deliver those services, to hire caregivers, to go out in the community and talk about what you do and why you do it, and then continue to build this momentum. I don't think if you talk to any of our franchisees, I'm pretty confident none of them will say it's easy, but they will talk about what that journey has been like, and I think it's that confidence, and then ultimately momentum. So You'll go through our structured training. You'll come to Omaha, be part of a cohort going through our Right Start Residence Week. You get a hands-on onboarding and guided launch plan. So, again, success leaves a trail. We continue to look and measure, what are the things that make a difference as franchisees are ramping up their business, and how do we measure progress against that? Your franchise business consultant or coach will work on a weekly basis on what are your priorities, what are the tasks. It's a project plan that you're going to work through, and building that competency around your staffing and hiring, community engagement, your what are the operational rhythms of the business, how do we think about the week and service week and billing and payroll, and ultimately, how do we deliver a really high quality experience for the clients and the families? So, it's a combination of coaching, it's accountability partners, it's real-time problem solving, but you have a team there supporting you. It's a challenge. There's no doubt about it, but there is support and really detailed personal support along the way. And by the end of the first year, you're not just building your business. You're really starting to think about, how do I grow this intentionally? And that can mean your payer mix, your other revenue sources, the relationships that you're building in the community. There's a little bit of an inflection point, I think, in terms of the mindset that you have as a business owner that only comes with going through that experience. We wish we could get you there faster, but we're really, really proud of the progress that every year we look at that onboarding and on-ramping and those milestones, and we see folks achieving them faster and faster, and it's really exciting.
Okay, thank you for that. And a question came in while you were answering that last question, and it's a two-part question. So I'm going to start with the first question. And just give some background information to this first part. So this question has to do with, all the different territories that we have in the United States. Some territories are very urban, and some are very rural. So we have a mixture of different types of territories. So this question says, could you speak to how the Right at Home support system is modified for franchise territories with more rural zip codes and geographical challenges in both recruiting/retaining caregivers and serving clients?
Yeah, it's a good question, and when we're describing the business, especially when we have the breadth of territories and franchisees that we have, it's interesting when we talk about who are our most successful, and it is not any one type per se. It isn't. We have really, really strong business owners that operate in big metros like Boston and New York. We have really, really successful franchise owners that live and operate in kind of mid-rural West Virginia. It's tough to get around from a navigation standpoint. It has a very different economic base than a more urban area. And then, we have some folks here in the Midwest, in Nebraska, for instance, that are really rural, and it's large territory, pockets of population, and all three are really, really successful. And the coaching and the support is more, I think, more consistent than you might believe, or might expect initially. The differences may be in payer source, in kind of the type of shifts, or the degree of skilled or non-clinically skilled care that you deliver. You may have a staffing piece, you may have some of these other dynamics, but at the end of the day, it's really about folks coming in, thinking about wanting to build a business with mission and serve the community. And these are folks that are out in the community talking about what they do. They're volunteering. They're connecting with influential people. They're connecting with those primary kind of, you would call them kind of sales personas. Who are the folks that you should know in your community, because you want them to know what you do and what you bring to the community. And how maybe you leverage VA versus Medicaid versus private pay versus short shifts or longer shifts is more of the dynamic that's at play in those different communities. And our coaches, our business performance coaches, have a portfolio, and they have a mix. It's not just urban coaches and suburban or rural. Everybody has a mix, and it's really about getting out there and building those relationships. The need for home care is everywhere. How people pay for that or access it may be a little bit different, but there's only a handful of payers that you'll be dealing with. When you think about well, my bill rate in rural Nebraska isn't the same as Boston, Brady. How am I supposed to build a business? But your pay rates aren't the same, right? So as we start to look at that, more of that scales and kind of self-corrects than maybe you think initially. And we firmly believe that as long as there is a population of seniors there is a need, and there is a community there that's trying to support those older seniors who ultimately want to stay home. That is kind of the leveling field. We see that everywhere. So to answer the first part of a question that was short with a very long answer, I think we have the capability, and we've seen success regardless of kind of that geography and demographics.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. And the second part of the question, it says, could you also comment on how much low Medicaid reimbursement rates, saturated market, or change to VA rules in territory would affect the business model?
Yeah. It's a really good question, and we talk a lot about your payer mix and what is healthy, what is not, or at least the dynamics at play. So for the majority of our franchise system, we're 70% private pay today, about 18% VA, and the rest is Medicaid and some other. We really coach to a private pay, an ideal private pay percentage closer to 75%. So what has happened? What has happened is the VA over the course of the last couple of administrations, really invested a lot in home care, and we saw an increase in rates in a lot of pockets, especially some larger rural states where they needed to drive more access to care. So they needed to drive the provider population, so they raised rates. Well, the pendulum eventually swings, right? It comes back, and we see some right sizing of those rates. As a business owner and a home care operator, you need to be just really mindful of where are those payer rates, and VA rates change annually. Medicaid rates about that, though it can be a little bit more dynamic. We love VA. We love serving our seniors. We love the Medicaid mission as well. But as Margaret, our CEO, likes to talk about, is if there's no margin, there's no mission. If you can't sustain your business, you won't be there tomorrow to help your clients. And it starts with us being able to be consistently there for the folks that trust us. So VA may be a very opportunistic situation for you today. Take advantage of that, serve our vets, but recognize that ultimately that change is out of our hands. And you can wake up January 1st and have a whole new pressure on your business if you haven't planned for it. And business ownership is nothing if not planning for the things that you never expected to happen, but now have to deal with. So, you build some dynamicism in your business. You have to be ready to pivot. There's obviously downward pressure on pay rate or bill rate for everything, right? Inflation and people have a fixed wallet in many, many cases. But it was true when I was in the hearing healthcare and hearing aid business, as it is in home care. I have to be really careful about not making decisions about how other people will spend their money. So the example is, if I had a child that was born with a hearing impairment and didn't have a whole lot of extra resource, I'm going to get my kid hearing aids, right? I will reorient my world around that need. And home care is the same. And the alternatives to home care are not inexpensive either. And we can be really efficient at keeping folks home where they want to be, keeping them safe and keeping them happy. So you just want to be really thoughtful around that. Those are the dynamics of being in business. They will create pressures on your business, but there's always an opportunity to respond. And at the end of the day, you have to have a profitable and sustainable business to ultimately live out the mission. And if you do it well, you build the relationships, you do it for the right reasons, you can maintain that margin regardless of the payer mix that you have. It's
Okay.
not easy, but you
Yeah.
can.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. We just have a few minutes left, so I like to end each webinar with a similar question. So for someone who is excited after watching this webinar, what are the sensible next steps to keep momentum going?
Well, then the next step is again that thoughtful momentum. So, we have an amazing franchise development team here, and they are your guide through this process. And we want the folks that are really thoughtful, challenge us around these kinds of questions. Are really great today. Spend time with the FDD, begin your validation calls, understand the opportunity, the responsibility, and this is meaningful work, but it's also a business. And we want to have an impact in every community that we serve, and that impact is the scale of what we do, but also the quality of what we do. So we are here to walk through the process every step with you. Your job is be really curious, ask lots of questions, talk to our franchisees, determine if this is the right fit for your goals and values. And we've got a team that will help you through that process. So we'd love to continue the conversation, and would love the opportunity at some point to welcome you right home.
Okay. Thank you, Brady, and thank you for doing this webinar and taking the time to do this webinar. I appreciate you doing this, and I know that our viewers do as well. So thanks again.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay, until next time.
Bye.
Bye.